Jim Karygiannis is the councillor for Ward 39, Scarborough Agincourt. He's also a former member of Parliament and is an outspoken opponent of Uber. Councillor, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me on the show.
I'm going to get right down to it. One of the big issues facing City Council today is the issue of taxis. And you've been an outspoken critic of one particular company, Uber, that's trying to set up shop here in Toronto.
Not so much Uber and Uber app as much as UberX. Uber is just an app.
All right.
But when they use it in order to have cars pick up folks, that is the problem that I have, because UberX is an unlicensed, unregulated segment of Uber.
Mm-hmm. And so specifically, they've made a number of attempts to get around some of the city bylaws. And the city tried to get an injunction early on that was dismissed based on a technicality.
The technicality by the judge said that it's peer-to-peer and did not go through a brokerage. Traditionally, a taxi cab and the bylaws that we have that captures the taxi cabs is that you have to call a brokerage, and then the brokerage dispatches a cab to you. And they're saying because it's peer-to-peer, somebody comes out of London, the judge opened his argument, somebody comes out of London, opens the phone, and it just goes to peer-to-peer, and the person comes and picks her up, she or he, and then they go drive away. It's not a taxi. So we brought legislation in that closes that loop, and charges are being laid right now. But in view of what happened out in Calgary a couple of days, we have to take the next step.
Just give us a little bit of background, if you're able to, on what happened in Calgary.
Calgary, the bylaws in Calgary, and they laid charges against UberX drivers. And then there was a court injunction, there was a decision by court until middle of December, that there's an injunction of Uber operating. And they did it against drivers. Now, we were told by the executive director of licensing that we have all the tools that we need and all the rules that are in place in order for us to capture UberX in the way that they were operating. A couple of months ago in council, I presented a motion that says that UberX should not be operating in the city of Toronto. That we asked them to do it. Unfortunately, Uber, using the evasive technology, they still are operating UberX, which is an unlicensed, unregulated body. Of shipping cars around. And in order for you to pick up somebody, to transport a person, you're going to have commercial insurance, and you also must be licensed. So they're using private cars that have no commercial insurance, and they're not licensed in order to pick people up and take them from point A to point B. And that's illegal.
Would you say then the traveling public that uses these ride-sharing apps are at any risk?
The public that uses the app, the Uber app, if they were to call a licensed cab, because there's some cabs that are usually, still are using Uber, they're not at risk, because the licensed taxi cab, it has an individual driver, which has gone through background checks, and it's also, police background checks, and there's also police background checks for vulnerable people. It has a commercial insurance, and if an accident should happen, then they're covered by the commercial insurance. Because they've gone through background checks, the possibility of something happening is less.
So with the holiday season upon us, there's going to be now thousands of these unlicensed, unregulated, uninsured cars hitting the roads across Toronto and the GTA. Has the city come up with any strategy to deal with that?
You said it was 10,000?
20,000.
At one point, 15,000, and as you said, right now there's supposedly 20,000.
Yeah.
I don't know what the executive director of licensing is, Ms. Trace Cook, is looking to do. I have sent a letter to Cesar and to her.
That's Councillor Palacio.
Cesar Palacio, which is the chair of
licensing
and committee, and I've asked that we get an in-camera update to see if we can, the same things that happened, the court injunction that they got out in Calgary, if we can do it here in Toronto. And I've copied all my fellow colleagues and Mrs. Cook. So I'm waiting to get an update. I requested an update from City Legal and City came to me with some of the gobbledygook, if I can say,
Sure.
legal terminology.
Right.
That we're doing this and we're watching and all that stuff. Well, it's simple. I mean, legal terms is one thing, but in reality, yes, you're going to act, or no, you're not going to act.
What I don't understand is that Uber introduces its services in Niagara Falls, and the Niagara Falls police are already out there charging. We're also seeing charges in Guelph and Kitchener
and everything else.
All those police forces seem to be able to find the resources to prosecute.
Well, the chief of police in Toronto has his own. His own agenda and his own things, the way of doing things. But as sure as hell, when they wanted to enforce traffic in the morning and give tickets, he was standing by the mayor, and they were singing, side by side, and like the Bobsey Twins, and move things along. Well, guess what? What about doing something for the Highway Traffic Act when it regulates 39.2, which is the section that says that you cannot transport somebody for money if you don't have, if you're not licensed and you don't have insurance. What is it going to take? Is it going to take somebody to get hurt really badly or die in an accident with Uber, and then those people to turn around and sue the city? I mean, the city is the one that regulates things, and the city has an obligation to make sure that the citizens of Toronto are safe. Right now, we're shying away from that obligation.
And how much tax leakage are we talking about? We had on Christine Hubbard from Beck, and she says that her firm alone contributes $1.2 million annually in HST. And
well, they said that they made $50 million in the first quarter, half quarter, whatever it is.
Right.
If they made $50 million, which is Uber said, well, you put that 13% on top of that, you're looking at about $7 million that was not paid to the federal coffers. $7 million that walked away from hospitals, $7 million that walked away from schools, because you got the HST, which is provincial, $7 million that goes back to the city, that you share the taxation with the city to make roads, $7 million that walked away from all kinds of things. $7 million is a lot of money. And if that's all in the city of Toronto, imagine right across Canada.
So what should the various levels of government do? I know that you've been an advocate at City Hall on stricter enforcement, but there's also the other two levels, and the taxation, the provincial, which administers the Highway Traffic Act and a number of others, and then there's the federal.
The federal government, and I'm going to write to Mr. Prime Minister Trudeau as well as his Minister of Finance in the upcoming days. One, they must check to see that everybody pays taxes. They should ask Uber for the list of the drivers and then send them notices out and say, we want to know, where you collected the money and where the money's going. I mean, Uber has they track the receipts, they track the ride, so therefore it's very easy. This is how much was made, this person should be making that should be made available to the federal government of Canada. Provincially, the provincial government of Ontario must enforce the Highway Traffic Act. They must make sure through the fiscal, which is the insurance, they must make sure that all the insurance companies they warn the drivers that if you drive for Uber or technologies that don't and you charge people for money, you would lose your insurance. And they should ask the insurance to send out a letter to people, so that way when you get it, if you're driving for Uber and Uber says, you don't worry about it, we got that $5 million policy that covers you, then people will say, whoa, hold on a second here, Uber's not telling us the right thing. And they should enforce the Highway Traffic Act. And one of the things, I know there's a private members bill in there that can tow cars and seize cars immediately. They should move that and fast track in front of the line. Provincially, municipally, I believe that once we get our horses in place and we get everything mounted up, we should go for a court injunction. The sooner, the better, in order to stop Uber.
Councillor, thank you very much for joining us today. I was joined by Councillor Jim Karygiannis, the City Councillor for Ward 39, Scarborough Agincourt. We'll be right back with The Point.